Hi folks, this is Philosopher Poet. Let's conclude our series on Ali Dawah making a completely incompetent attempt at proving God and claiming on his channel that he has proven God in 5 minutes. I've lost the count on the number of fallacies he's committed thus far in his argumentation, but I'll present the total count at the end of this video. Also, I've prepared a presentation of where the confusion lies between the theist and the naturalist when it comes to the question of the necessary being and the first cause arguments. You don't want to miss that one, so hang tight.
A lot of belief systems is based on the fact that there has to be a starting point.
But there has to.
But not necessarily.
But do you have evidence?
That is a fallacy.
And Ali Dawah continues his hot streak of fallacious arguments. This time it's the burden of proof fallacy. Ali Dawah says that there has to be a starting point necessarily, but the interlocutor correctly points out that it's a fallacy to assume that the universe had a beginning necessarily. The interlocutor only has to point out that it's logically possible for the universe to have existed eternally or necessarily, and the onus is on Ali Dawah to prove that God must exist eternally or necessarily and not the universe. Even if the interlocutor provides zero evidence, the burden of proof is still on Ali Dawah to establish that it's necessarily the case that there was a starting point of the universe, and he doesn't have the answers, so he conveniently wants to shift the burden of proof.
To assume that time had a beginning.
Okay, so do you have any evidence contrary to that?
Let me ask you this, is time ever going to end?
Is time ever going to end? No. What we agree,
So how can it begin?
because we can believe,
Surely it's just
we
it's forever.
accept infinite post-eternally, but not pre-eternally.
Why
Because
is
what that means is, because we believe in hell and heaven, but the hell and heaven depends on God. So post-eternally, this way, God created, let's suppose, our universe from here, yeah? Okay, God has always existed, yeah? God Almighty has always existed. The question we're asking is, what caused it? People say, oh, it came from nothing. That's an impossibility. From nothing, nothing comes. It came by chance. What kind of chance? It's always been there. Prove to me.
Notice that when it comes to God, he simply asserts that God Almighty has always existed and brushes it off. He applies zero critical thought to this belief or claim. But when it comes to the universe having always existed, he suddenly wants proof.
You have to prove to me the concept of infinite. If you say it was always there, this concept of infinite doesn't exist in the real world. There's no such thing as infinite in our real world. Actual, there's in mathematics, there's possible infinity, potential infinite. But I'm talking about, there is no concept of that.
Oh, Ali Dawah, he doesn't realize the irony in his position here. In his passion to prove God, he's ended up disproving God with this argument. When he says infinity doesn't exist in the actual world, what he's pretty much saying is that God doesn't exist in the actual world, because God is supposed to be both past and future, eternal or infinite. Is Ali Dawah saying that God doesn't exist in the actual world but only mathematically or as an abstract concept? Ali Dawah is all over the place with his reasoning. If he says that God can exist infinitely in the past, then he exists infinitely in the actual world. Then even the initial state of the universe could exist infinitely in the past. If he thinks that the initial state of the universe cannot exist infinitely in the past, but God can do the same, then he's committing yet another fallacy of special pleading.
What we go back to is the Big Bang, and what we're saying is what caused it to explode.
Here Ali Dawah again shows his incompetence on the subject matter when he calls the Big Bang as an explosion. He thinks that just because it has the word bang, it means that the universe exploded like a firecracker. Let's read what the Big Bang actually is. The Big Bang wasn't a bang at all, at least not in the common definition. It didn't explode in a scene of shrapnel and fire, and there was definitely no mushroom cloud. The Big Bang theory of universe is derived from Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity and the idea that the universe expanded from a minuscule dense collection of energy called a singularity. There was no bang, just a vast expansion of extremely condensed material.
So are you claiming that, or are you saying that it's a big jump to say that there has to be a deity or something? Do you think it's like...
Yeah.
No, but...
There's a lot, like, even if there was a first instance.
No, but the thing is...
This person here with Ali Dawah seems to be catching the drift when Ali Dawah goes in complete denial mode. He seems to realize that this line of reasoning will pose a problem for his argument, so he completely sidesteps it.
But the thing is, when it comes to rationality and logic, that is the best explanation. For example, we know it cannot come from nothing.
Ali Dawah seems to be softening his position now from God exists necessarily to now saying that it's the best explanation. And must I point out that he again repeats his straw man of it cannot come from nothing, when nobody's arguing that.
So therefore we have to accept that something was caused, which we accepted. Remember?
Yeah,
I just think.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
No, after you.
Okay, I'm saying I think you have a good argument, but I don't think that's definitive proof to like there is a God. It could have been anything.
She's right. He's not even come close to establishing God, even remotely, by any given standard of logic and reasoning. Instead, he's committed fallacies after fallacies ad nauseum and keeps repeating a straw man that it can't come from nothing when no one's arguing that. It's almost like he has a script and he keeps reading from that. Almost like a salesman as opposed to a thinker.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't think like.
Okay.
Also, like, even if you're right and there was a God and there's a first God, like, why, there's so many religions, like, and I grew up in a Mormon church for like 16 years. I was fully convinced. Like, no one's beliefs could tell me any different that I was wrong.
Yeah.
But, like,
100%.
In reality, there's so many different gods and different forms that the start of the universe can take.
Okay, what we say is that...
And how would we
You can't rely on
No,
anyone.
I'm so sorry.
And how would we know about God? Like, is something that we've made up?
Okay, so what we say is that, look, I'm not talking about religion. I'm putting religion to a side for now. What I want to do is I want to establish if God exists or not and going through the best possible explanation with our logic. Because when we wake up, we use our rational logic on a day-to-day basis. You guys came here today, why? Because you said, let's visit Speaker's Corner. You gave yourself a purpose, you put your shoes on, you came here. You didn't wake up and say, maybe I'm in the Matrix. Let's go Speaker's Corner.
He's just rambling at this point without making any coherent argument. But let's listen on.
Hey, what's Speaker's Corner? It doesn't exist. Am I here? You didn't do that. You went with your best logical explanation of I exist. That's what Rene Descartes said, yeah? I think, therefore I am. Yeah? So meaning that you woke up, you use your rational logic to put your shoes on, have breakfast, get ready, wear a nice shirt like this, yeah? You went in the mirror, you went in the mirror and said, look, I'm gonna look smart. You gave yourself a purpose with a nice jeans. Are you guys a couple, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, good. If you get married, call me to your wedding, please. So the point is this, yeah? I'm just trying to say, even you guys coming together, you know what, you was attracted to her, she was attracted to you. You use logic and rationality to build a relationship. What we're saying is, use the same logic and rationality to say, hold on a second, it cannot come from nothing. Therefore, it requires a cause. Now, you can have a right to say, hold on a second, Ali. Okay, a creator exists, but how is it Allah? You have a right to ask that. I'm not going down that route yet. All I'm just saying is, does it make plausible sense to the best explanation that a creator exists?
No, I'm still not convinced that there was an initial thing. Like,
So you believe it was always there?
there's no evidence to suggest either way. So why should I be convinced?
That's a great point. From his point of view, there is no evidence either way, so why should he choose one position over the other?
We do have
There's a God.
evidence for cause and effect, but we have
Theoretically, like, that makes sense that there has to be, in our understanding of things, there has to be a
Yes,
first thing.
exactly.
I don't think we can comprehend the fact that maybe time is endless.
No, but time is irrelevant. So, for example, if I have an empty glass, yeah, this is an empty bottle. If we give this infinite amount of time, I would have a chocolate cheesecake with 4 strawberries on it. The point is this, time is irrelevant to the question because the elements to make a chocolate cheesecake with 4 strawberries are not in the bottle. So giving it time, say an infinite or billion years, is irrelevant to the equation because the elements to make the cheesecake is not in there. So what I'm trying to say is to say, if you give it this time or that time, this will happen, it's not relevant to the equation here. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
He again repeats his fallacy from the previous parts, that of composition and division. I've already addressed this in the previous parts, so I won't address it here. But Ali Dawah doesn't understand what emergent properties are.
What if hypothetically, the universe began? No, it didn't begin. It's just always been there, and there were just a lot of nutrients, a lot of minerals, a lot of all this stuff in the universe that just eventually just came together and just made the world the way it is. Why does it have to be nothing?
Okay.
That's another great point. Matter and energy in motion could have given rise to everything. The fundamental particles of nature giving rise to heavier elements, giving rise to multiple emergent properties, and eventually life, evolution, and us. It's a logical possibility and hence cannot be ignored.
But the point is this, why do you go to that example, which we don't have infinite? Infinite doesn't exist in the real world. We know there's an expansion of the universe. It's expanding. So if we rewind it, it has to go to a singular point. Yeah? And even there, it's like what caused it. What you're saying is that it was always there. So
Ali Dawah gets it, yet pretends to not get it. Maybe this is the best time to present what I mentioned earlier about the confusion between the theist and the naturalist. Imagine this is the universe. And I'm not talking our space-time or the scientific definition of the universe, but the entire universe, the entire cosmos, the philosophical universe with a capital U. Now imagine this is the initial state of the universe, which is the first cause that always existed. Then there was the Big Bang expansion that happened as we know it. Both the theist and the naturalist are committed to the idea that something must have existed out of necessity, that belongs to all possible worlds. The naturalist would say that it's the cosmos or the initial singularity that exists necessarily, while the theist postulates another ontology on top of the cosmos, which is God being the necessary being, and the cosmos is the contingent being, contingent on God. Postulating God is an unnecessary metaphysical hypothesis, according to the naturalist, and that's why they reject it.
You're saying it is, sorry, what you're saying here is that it was always there, infinite. You have to prove that. Does infinite exist in the real world? I'll give you an example.
Oh, I don't have to prove it though.
He's right. He doesn't have to prove that. If Ali Dawah really respects logic and reasoning, as he was pretending to a while earlier, then he'd know that all the interlocutor has to do is to show that there's a logical possibility of a universe existing eternally and necessarily, and thus it cannot be that God is a necessary being, unless the theist wants to claim that both God and the universe exist necessarily and not contingent on each other, which the theist would never do. Or the theist would have to show that such an idea is a logical impossibility, that is, the argument entails a logical contradiction in it.
Because I'm not relying on, I'm not relying on a concept of a human-esque kind of God. You know, I don't have to. I'm not trying to establish a religion. I'm just basing it on.
No, forget religion. I'm not talking about.
God is religion.
No, I'm not talking about religion. Yeah.
They're inseparable.
No. But first we need to establish if God exists. Then religion is the next step. If I have an infinite amount of bananas and I eat 2, how many bananas do I have? That's it contradicts it, because infinite has no. You can't have infinite plus 1 or infinite minus 2. It contradicts infinite.
Now, I must say that I'm not well read on this topic, and infinity is a very complex topic, so I'll refrain from commenting here. But my understanding is that infinity is a concept and it's not a number, as Ali Dawah is trying to use it as a number. However, it doesn't do anything to support his argument, because if infinity doesn't exist in the real world, then God doesn't exist in the real world, with his own admission.
My point is the following. We know infinite doesn't exist in the real world. There's no such thing as infinite in the real world. Therefore, if we don't have that explanation, and we know by logic that from nothing comes, it requires us to logically accept that there was a cause. Something caused it. Not a man. I'm not saying it's a human being. I'm saying a creator must have caused it.
Because I feel like this question is perhaps the biggest indication that there is a God, because like it's very difficult to answer. You know, I mean, if there is an initial point in a universe, what caused that cause?
Asking what caused the initial point of the universe to a naturalist is the same as asking what caused God to a theist. I mean, something, like I explained, would have existed by necessity, and it's incoherent to ask what caused something that's uncaused.
I don't know, like that analogy of bananas doesn't really relate to the concept of time. Like, what if you have an infinite amount of time and you take away 2 seconds, how much time, like, that doesn't make sense.
No, but that's what I'm trying to say. Like, for example, God Almighty tells us that he takes an oath by time. He says, I am time. So what we're trying to say is that God has always existed, which was my first explanation about the independent being.
Saying God has always existed is not an explanation, it's a claim. It's the very claim that you have got to prove. You don't understand simple terms.
He's independent, self-sufficient. We are dependent on food and other elements, and our universe is dependent on things.
What's your argument for that? What's your argument for the universe is dependent on things? Not just an assertion, but what's your argument?
He is the seabed that everything falls back on, and is independent.
The cosmos is what everything falls back on and is independent. See, two can play this game.
So he is infinite. I accept that.
So he accepts that God is infinite, and yet earlier he was saying that infinites don't exist in the actual world. Does God exist in the actual world, Ali Dawah? Or is he just exist in the imaginary world, or an abstract concept?
Time was not created for him. What we're trying to say is that he gave rise to us. We had a starting point. He didn't. So that's why we're saying is what caused it. It has to be God. That's my claim anyway. Look, I'm not pushing on you. I'm just trying to say it's just thought-provoking.
Because it is, like I said, it's a very strong question to ask. What caused this? And why are the people claiming that there is an entity that caused it? It's a 2 separate questions.
What do you think the purpose of God is?
Okay, good. So what we say...
The original video just ends abruptly here, but as you can see, in the course of his 5 minutes or so, Ali Dawah has committed a number of fallacies: burden of proof, straw man, composition division fallacy, ad ignorantium or appeal to ignorance, more precisely, God of the gaps, false analogy, personal incredulity, and he's also used non sequiturs at a couple of places. If anything, he managed to disprove his God more than what he was able to prove his God in a matter of minutes. I'm trying to imagine, how can someone be so fallacious and ignorant of a topic and yet so confident and boastful in their demeanor? If this is what Islamic Dawah has come down to, then reason and rationality has nothing to be afraid of. It will keep prevailing over dogma. If you like my content, please subscribe and share my message. Until then, peace out.